Hello, I'm Candace. Welcome to my brief talk on queer second adolescence. This is a topic that is close to me, both from a lived experience perspective and because of the fortune that I have in working alongside my clients. A little bit about me. I'm a psychologist with a background in developmental psychology and a psychotherapist focusing on psychosexual and relationship matters with my clients. I also have a specific focus on queer clients or those with identified gender, sexual, or relational diversities. I live and work in Berlin, Germany, in private practice, and also see clients globally online. Queer second adolescence is a colloquial phrase that describes the thrilling, emotional, and sometimes frightening and messy experience that a queer person has later in life, aligned with their queer identity. This experience comes about following an initial developmental adolescence that was lived within an anti queer or oppressive space, whether that space was outwardly queer phobic or at a time in life prior to the person's queer identification. As queer second adolescence is a more colloquial term, rather than a scientific one at this time, there is potential for it to be misunderstood. What this time represents for queer people is certainly an opportunity for needed healing and liberation from earlier developmental time periods in their life. However, what this could also look like is a more heteronormative judgmental space, like a midlife crisis, a time of being irresponsible based on society's views of chronological age, or even a delay in maturation or a developmental delay, seeing the person as immature or as a late bloomer. Human development has long been studied from multiple perspectives, and many stage theories have been proposed, some breaking down adolescence into smaller bits, such as early adolescence, middle adolescence, or later adolescence. Most notably is Erik Erikson's stage theory of development, which encompasses the lifespan and highlights the adolescent period as roughly between the ages of 12 and 18. Erikson referred to this stage, which corresponds to stage 5 of his 8-stage lifespan developmental theory, as identity versus confusion. Erikson, a psychologist who was focused on psychosocial development, proposed that adolescence is the stage in which young people start trying to answer the question, who am I? The inherent confusion about their subjective sense of self prompts adolescents to experiment with different roles and behaviors. During this exploratory process, social peer relationships become more important in answering this identity question and beginning to solidify values and beliefs about the self and the world. This is a developmental time that encompasses self exploration, discovery, navigation of peer pressure, and seeking to fit in or find your people, or at least those that accept you. This is also a time of seeking parental acceptance, which, when not present, can shift to peers or partners. Oftentimes, the experience of developmental or first adolescence encompasses behaviors that society expects of you, or what you should do. Let's take a look at why this can happen. The period of adolescence is characterized by patterns of thinking and brain development that shifts as a person moves into adulthood. Adolescents tend to have more concrete thinking. It's more binary or black and white in nature, leading to difficulties seeing the nuances of decisions or being susceptible to behaving in a way that is consistent with what you think you should do. We gain the ability to more easily think abstractly as we age, see the nuances, and live more in the gray. Adolescence is also characterized by more egocentric thinking and a feeling of invincibility, or the thought that nothing bad could really happen to you. This sense of invincibility and invulnerability has been linked to risk taking behaviors. As we age, we gain a more vulnerable perspective, the notion that bad things could, in fact, happen to us. Another very important characteristic of adolescent thinking is that it is structurally more amygdala driven, with the directionality of communication pathways going from the amygdala to our prefrontal cortex. As we age and our brains mature, the direction of this communication can be more frontal cortex driven, enabling the frontal cortex to access our executive functioning skills and communicate to the amygdala. Let's take a brief look at what this means. Earlier in our brain development, the amygdala, or the emotional center of our brain, is the first responder. The connections between the amygdala and the prefrontal cortex are still forming, such that there's a gap between the socio-emotional system and the cognitive control system. Some have linked this gap to engagement in risk-taking behaviors. It's kind of like starting the engine of the car without knowing how to drive. Yeah, which I also did. The amygdala, or the emotional control center, is responsible for the more automatic reactive responses, like the fight or flight reflex. As we age, the amygdala gets better at assigning more emotional responses that are balanced for sensory input based on associative learning. And it takes a bit of a backseat to the executive functions of the prefrontal cortex, such as planning, response inhibition, and decision making. But what happens when an adult who's now more aligned with their queer identity wants the opportunity to experience a queer adolescence? They simply want a do over. When this button is pushed, it can seem like an activation of the emotional processing center, the amygdala, rather than the cognitive processing center, the prefrontal cortex. Balancing the desire for novel experiences, sensation seeking of pleasant emotional experiences, can be tricky, even with an adult brain. The adolescent behaviors, such as novelty and sensation seeking, increased risk taking, and a social shift toward peer interactions can all percolate to the surface in a rather dysregulating way. High emotional arousal is then again dominant over logical cognitive thinking. When working with clients experiencing a sense of queer second adolescence, it is important to affirm and normalize the potential sense of feeling out of control or immature. Affirm the reality of their desire to live their adolescence of choice, and acknowledge the grief that may be present in not having had an initial adolescence that was aligned with their desires and identity. Acknowledge the inner conflict of wanting to reclaim their adolescence with their current responsibilities as an adult. And work with the shame or embarrassment that may be present within this conflict. The desire for a teenage rebellion, coupled with the wisdom required in an adult world, can be a very conflicting time. Help the client navigate their shift from adolescent egocentric thinking and invincibility to accessing their cognitive thinking and the possible that is within their adulthood. Often, egocentric thinking clashes with a desired adult lifestyle. Adults often have the resources and the means, financially and with autonomy, to engage in higher risk behaviors. Remind clients that they also have the cognitive resources to balance this potentially conflicted state. They can now further access their ability to be vulnerable, manage their impulse control, make complex decisions with known consequences, and be abstract thinkers. As a therapist, be aware of the coexisting challenges at this time that could be present, such as compulsive sexual behaviors, sexualized drug use, and intimate partner violence. If you haven't already familiarized yourself with these topics, I encourage you to, and the uniqueness of these behaviors within the queer community. By moving through the experience of a second adolescence and queering our lives, we dismantle oppressive systems, come into alignment with ourselves, and build structures of compassion and belonging. It's never too late for such joy, but it can be navigated more securely with an affirmative therapist who holds space for this unique healing and liberating experience. These are just a few resources for your reference. Thank you for being here with me, and please let me know if you have any comments or questions.